Well, hello, group. Welcome back to the Snap No Tap podcast. Tony Cecchine here. Joe Cardinal. No, Nico. He's working again. Joe, how are you?
Doing really good. And a happy belated Veterans Day out there to everybody who's listening, who's a veteran. Thank you for your service, of course.
Absolutely. And it was also November 10th was Marine Corps birthday. So, yeah. And it was old Uncle Vinny's birthday, and he passed away November 8th, which I always honor that. And boy, that's what, 13 years ago? Unbelievable. Some of you guys who have come out to train with me met Uncle Vinny, Paul Dodds especially. They became quite friendly. Yeah, boy, time flies, right?
Well, yeah, unbelievable. Well, I don't want to talk about how old I am. I just, our topic for the day, actually, I was thinking back on like how many years have passed. We'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, just the passage of time and how, things keep changing. I think it's just you become more and more aware of it the older you get.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. I remember as a young kid, all the old, because I was raised around a bunch of old timers, World War I and World War II people. Like my grandparents were World War II, but there were still people around in the neighborhood or in the church that were from World War I, So yeah, they're like, the older you get, the faster time flies. Yeah, they were right. So it's not a new phenomenon. It even happened to them back then.
Yeah, I remember the phrase that I think sums it up really well is that you kind of grow up slowly and then you grow old fast. So you get it coming and going, basically. That's there's no winning.
Like the lyric from one of Sinatra's songs, youth is wasted on the young.
Mhm.
If we just knew, like I'll speak for myself, if I knew then what I know now, in certain things, yeah, it would have been a much more successful life. But hey, what are you going to do? Yeah, here we are now. So, but yeah, I've it's when Uncle Vinny, on November 8th, he died a couple days before his birthday. Ironically, I was training to, getting in shape to film the Snap No Tap video that month, November, and I would spend every night at the hospital with him. And most days, but of course I'd go to the gym to lift. Well, I blew my arm out, which is kind of funny in a way, because here I am, I'm down in the first floor, I'm in the emergency room of the same hospital he's at. Yeah, it was just kind of bizarre. The whole thing was just kind of a weird thing. But
did he pass before the filming then, or?
Yes,
oh, that must have messed with your head having to film with that over.
Well, yeah, I had the broken hip. I had the whole, everything, the labrum, the bicep, the collarbone, all that, the rotator cuff. Yeah, I'm all, dealing with his death. It was a very difficult thing when I filmed that, the Snap No Tap later in November. And then knowing that I couldn't get surgery at all because they already had this thing lock, stock, and barrel, I didn't even tell them about all my injuries. I just showed up and, I had my arm out of the sling and just, let's go film. And I didn't get my surgery until the following February, so several months, 3 months, whatever later, which was a fiasco too with that. But yeah, it was tough. And Paul Newman had just died. I remember mentioning that to Uncle Vinny, and yeah, it was just rough time. So
Has the arm like that? I'm imagining after that surgery, though, the arm never fully recovers, even with the surgery.
well, this arm never got the surgery. But what got me mad about this arm is that the doctor that I had, I won't mention his name, but he was the chief of surgery at the one hospital I ended up having to go to. He purposely did not fix the bicep tendon. He didn't fix the rotator cuff because he just wanted me literally to stop doing what I was doing. He wanted me to stop heavy lifting. He wanted me to stop all this fighting stuff and all this training. I didn't even know the guy until that day of that, until I, got him to be my surgeon. Who is he to make these decisions? So yeah, I never got any of that. All he did was shave down my collarbone and reattach the labrum, which I still think I have problems with. Because when I try to lift now, there's clicking here on my collarbone. I have to be very careful. I don't do any more overhead lifts. So yeah, who is he to do that? To make that judgment on me? You're in there. It's not going to, stitch up the rotator cuff. What difference does it make? It's not going to. What's it going to add? 10 minutes? Surgery. Insurance was covering it anyway. So yeah, in a labrum, just the labrum is a long recovery. But when you have everything else involved, yeah, it was tough. But yeah, that actually happened election day or the day before the election day, whatever it was. I didn't even get a chance to vote because I was in the emergency room. So yeah, then afterwards I go upstairs to see Uncle Vinny, and I'm in the sling, and they didn't do anything for me in the emergency room. They're just like, here, you got to go see these, you got to find an orthopedic surgeon. And that was the big thing. So I saw one guy who was an old timer who was going to cut me wide open. And, he didn't do the, what do you call that? Arthroscopic.
Arthroscopy. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I found another one who he was a big shot in Chicago. We were booked. Let's do it. And then like 3 days before the surgery, he calls me. He literally calls me. He calls me and says, well, we don't take your insurance. I'm like, what? But I'm willing to work out a deal with you. The surgery was like 50 grand. He says, I'll make payments with you. I'm like, no, I have insurance. I'll just why would I pay you 50 grand out of my own pocket for this? I have insurance. I'll find another doctor. So I found another doctor, and the clock was ticking here. I just needed some relief, temporary relief for pain, because I knew I couldn't get the surgery because, like I said, I was filming later that month in Colorado. So yeah, I eventually found a surgeon through my friend Dan, the Cook County Sheriff, my next door neighbor at the time. It was his surgeon. So yeah, that's how that all went down. So I saw him before I don't remember now if I saw him before I filmed the video or not. I don't remember now, but I think it was, because I'm pretty sure that, we had to schedule it in advance. And then, it was a Friday the 13th in February. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, of all days, yeah. And it was downtown. It was on the lakefront pretty much, or close to the lake, where I had where the surgery was. It was day surgery, but you had to have somebody pick you up because, you went out, they put you out. It was a general anesthesia, which I got sick from, but yeah, it was interesting.
Well, I could talk about my meniscus and my knee torn. I could tell about that surgery. I was lucky that went well, though. And this was years ago in the 90s when this happened. And I've been lucky that that knee has not degenerated any further, considering that I still train fairly regularly. But instead of doing that, I think it'd be time to kind of do our plugs before we get into the meat of the program. So first and foremost, we've made this announcement the past few shows, but we are retiring the Tri-C program. So if you're looking for getting authentic catch wrestling training from Tony, this is the best way you can do it for yourself, the best, price performance for you, because basically you get lifetime access to Tony through video training. You get immediate access to all his videos. And I think, Tony, we extended this to the afterlife during Halloween, correct? for
Yes,
those who
yes.
sign up.
Yeah, so you
So,
get that and you get live in person if you're in Chicago as well.
right. So,
Oh,
yeah, in person or in the spirit if it's the afterlife. But you have, yeah, basically, lock this pricing in because this pricing will not return. It's kind of a ridiculous, the amount of money you pay for what you have, access to for the rest of your training days. You can come in and, train at, Tony's place occasionally and coordinate that. And a lot of people are doing that. Some of the initial people, there's testimonies up on our YouTube site about how that works, but you really can't do better as far as the most flexible and most amount of access to getting catch and boxing training, from Tony.
self-defense, fitness, all of it. Everything I know, you'll get to know in time.
Yeah, so that's perfect access to that. We also have our membership for those who cannot afford, in-person training at other levels. At a minimum, we ask that people who enjoy this podcast or use our free content on YouTube to pitch in monthly, just kind of like a Patreon style deal. We have 2 levels, the thank you $5 a month level, which is very appreciated for those who have joined up. It means a lot to us that you're listening and that you're telling us you care. And then we've got a $10 a month level, which we provide monthly videos, new videos, basically little impromptu training sessions with Tony, myself, Brian Deneve, whoever's on hand. So you're getting access into that. A lot of times it's answers to questions from students or members. So we kind of deal with that, but it's brand new content on a monthly basis that you have access just for $10 a month. So one of those 2 should work for everybody out there. Honestly, if you're listening, something should work for you. We also want to plug some of our friend schools out there, Bender Martial Arts and Fitness up on the north side. If you're looking for gi jiu-jitsu, he now has judo and Muay Thai. So a really well-rounded school and a really friendly environment, great guys. We've had a couple of the people on, Melody here is another coach from there that was on our show recently, and Blaine as well. So high level talent at that school. So you can't do wrong for that. If you're looking for authentic, probably the most authentic Muay Thai instruction in the Midwest, for sure in the Chicagoland area, Rick Solo's Akai Academy, also on the north side. He's just been to Thailand dozens and dozens of times. It's been his life's passion and he loves sharing it. So we encourage that. And of course, if you're looking for no-gi grappling and jiu-jitsu, 10th Planet Chicago, Josh Piscini, look him up. A great guy, a tough group of guys, a really good group to work with. So those are 3 friend schools of ours that we highly recommend. And yeah, I think that's it. So on to the topic. So we wanted to kind of veer off our normal martial arts focus somewhat for the day, right, Tony?
Correct. Correct.
Just looking to have kind of a casual comment. And you and I are both movie fans, I would think, correct?
Correct.
So this is going to be kind of our Siskel and Ebert moment of, at the movies with Joe and Tony. People don't even probably remember who Siskel and Ebert are. Did you, when you were in Cleveland, did they make it out by you? Did you guys watch them?
Yeah, they were national.
Okay. Because they used to start off on PBS here in Chicago on our channel 11. I think it was at the movies at that point, but then they went national. I don't know at what point they crossed over, but ever since I was a kid, they were on. Those were the movie reviewers from the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times, and they became famous later on for the thumbs up, thumbs down thing. But they used to just do like regular 3- and 4-star ratings. And back in the 70s, they were much more prone to fight about what movies were good and not. And that was when it was a lot of fun to watch that show. So, but now I know it'll be interesting because I think we have very different. I think different perspectives on movies. I bet you I wonder what we have as far as overlap, as far as movies that we like or not. Because I think my tastes are maybe more mainstream. I probably watch, and I think you tend to veer towards like older, more, unique films. So like, let's start off. Like, what's your favorite film of all time?
Well, okay, so a lot of it is like food. It depends on your mood, but I will go out and just say this straight out. My favorite film of all time won the Oscar in 1946 for best film. Best Years of Our Lives. That's the name of it. It was basically about returning World War II veterans. The movie was way ahead of its time because it addressed certain topics, infidelity, a cheating wife, basically, alcoholism, and handicap. and it was, or disabled, as the term is now, and it was very, you know, and as a matter of fact, the one character that I said with the unfaithful wife, he also suffered from what would be now known as PTSD. So yeah, it was a very touching movie. It is in certain elements I could relate to. So that is my all-time favorite movie. And then of course I'll also throw in, the Godfather Part Two for different. That's an epic. That's different reasons, but yeah, I go with the best years of our lives for me. What about you?
Let me talk about the best years of our lives, because I was vaguely aware of it, but because I knew it was like one of your favorite or your favorite film,
Yep.
I went to start watching it recently, and I also was impressed at how hardcore it was, or I should say, deep it was, considering, like you said, it was 1946. So this
Correct.
is right after World War II. And to really, you'd think that the country, the last thing they want to deal with, I don't know what the mood of the country was. Obviously, neither of us were there at the time. But, I get the impression that it was very, obviously very patriotic, very rah-rah pace. And this movie was dealing with the aftermath, the hard aftermath for a lot of these veterans coming home. And maybe it's very timely, with Veterans Day too, that a lot of, so for them to shine a spotlight on, right away, I think. I mean, the kind of timing of that film to me was kind of, I don't know if shocking or just kind of audacious. I was pretty impressed that they were willing to, it wasn't all flag waving and, heroes welcomes. Unfortunately, I think most returning veterans have, had a lot of tough times. And like, even now, I know that the suicide rate among veterans is like twice that of, civilians of the same, age population. So the fact that this movie kind of at least put the foot in the water to try and address that and expose that, I was really impressed with that. Just as far as talking about, like, the human condition and topics like that's impressive. That's stuff you didn't see again really until, like, the Vietnam era, heavier movies dealing with those wars. I can't think of anything else like that on that level. So but to answer your question, my favorite movie of all time is the original King Kong I saw. So talk about the opposite ends of the spectrum. Definitely shows how kind of very different. Mine is definitely in the realm of fantasy, but it's interesting because most people I think I saw that as a kid on television, like, and it was probably the first movie to make me cry. I think, like, I think it's very interesting. Like, I could do an entire podcast talking about that film. Most people think of it as just kind of a giant monster movie, kind of a special effects, extravaganza, which it was for its time. I mean, considering that they did this during the Depression, that they did it all in camera with, like tiny little puppets. The look of it is amazing what they were able to accomplish. But the other thing to me that was amazing is that my comment on it is, and why I think that story transcends and became iconic, where it wasn't just like another Jurassic Park, where it wasn't just another big monster on the loose kind of, although it was really the first one, the giant monster run amok kind of a thing. So I'm so into that movie that I read the novelization of it, which was the first novelization of any movie, is my understanding. And also some of the script. You can find the original script online. But my reason for bringing that up is that really, to me, the artistry of both the animators and the music composers really changed the impact of the end of that, and to me, the meaning of the film. So my understanding is that most of the creators, the writers and producers and things, their goal was just to make a big special effects extravaganza, just a big monster movie, and you can kind of see that from the movie posters too. But because the animators, Willis O'Brien was the main animator, but there were others who worked on his team. They really humanized the ape, I guess, or made him alive and gave him emotion, gave Kong. So at the end there, and along with the soundtrack, at the end, on film only, really, it doesn't come across in any of the other mediums that this story is portrayed. He becomes the sympathetic character. He becomes a victim. When he dies at the end, a lot of the people, not everybody, but a lot of the people who watch that see that as a tragic ending. so to me, the movie is a tragedy. And I think it's, to me, when I think on it, it's almost, it becomes symbolic of man's relationship with nature. I mean, it's funny that I'm getting deep about this movie, but I really think so. It really shows that through exploitation and greed, our natural resources are misused and abused, and ultimately ends in tragedy. So to me, it's like a cautionary tale of what can go wrong with our unchecked, basically, like I said, greed and ignorance, and not only the loss of natural wonders like and like an amazing animal like Kong, but also a lot of human life is lost. And I think that message kind of transcends the monster movie thing. And I think maybe even as a kid watching that at some level, and I think it hit me kind of hard too, because I grew up with a ton of pets. I had like a couple dogs, 5 or 6 cats. I lived like in a mini zoo, basically. My mom was an animal nut. So immediately, I didn't see Kong as like a threat. I mean, I'm sure a giant animal would be scary, but like I still, thought to relate to it like I would like my dogs or cats. So, anyways, that movie had a huge impact on me, and I still love it to this day. I'm still kind of in awe of what they did. So, I loved Peter Jackson's remake. I think that was super cool. I think he clearly loved that movie like I did. And subsequent remakes of that movie. So like there was the one in the 70s, Dino De Laurentiis. They kind of got the idea. They kind of understood the subtext, and they brought it to the forefront. And this again with Peter Jackson, the same thing. Who truly is the victim here? So they've taken that story and they've expounded on it. So I've liked all versions of it. Like Peter Jackson's is fantastic, but the original still stands in my mind. Yeah, The Godfather, of course, like you said, it's amazing. It's an amazing piece of work. It's like a Rembrandt painting. It just looks beautiful. It's one of those things that when I compare it to other films, it's kind of amazing to compare it to anything else of that era. I don't know how he did it. Obviously, great source material to start for, a really, like you said, epic story to tell. But it just, yeah, everything about that movie is fantastic. So I'm going to deviate on that and follow up question with you. Which Godfather is the best Godfather movie?
Part 2.
Part 2, huh?
Yeah. But you see, now, again, when I was a kid, the first major movie that influenced me probably was The Hustler, okay? Because I saw that before I saw Best Years of Our Lives and The Godfather. But I read the book by Mario Puzo. It was a big, thick black book, small one, but I read it, The Godfather, and so I had kind of an idea. The movie was a little different in certain aspects, but for me, no, I like The Godfather Part 2. It kind of focused, obviously, on Michael Corleone, but I have a connection, I think I mentioned, to The Godfather Part 1. They're both to me almost equal in a way, but I can say that off the top of my head, The Godfather Part 2 is probably the only movie that I can think of where the sequel was at least as good as the original. There may be others I can't think of right now. I mean, I did like Rocky 2 only because he became the champion, right? But we're not comparing those kind of movies to The Godfather or Best Years of Our Lives. But and then as I got older, I appreciated the Godfather sagas more for their cinematic, like you said, they're beautiful movies. They're, glamorous, kind of like with the Citizen Kane, with the cinematography and all of that. And I became a little more anti, it doesn't paint Italian Americans in a good light. What this pretty much everybody thinks Italians are all mob guys. And that's just not the case. But yeah, I like both, but yeah, I'd rather probably watch Part 2. I did not like Part 3. I can't sit through Part 3.
Yeah, that's such a shame. Yeah. Now, to your point, I've seen other film series where the sequel is good or as better. I mean, the one that comes to my mind, obviously, is Star Wars. I think The Empire Strikes Back is probably the best film in all of the Star Wars, franchise. And so they surpassed the original. That would come to my mind. But subsequent films, the decline happens fairly quickly in that series where, the third one, and then, it just it's very hard to find a good one after that. But yeah, it's like, there's very few trilogies where all three are on par. I think maybe the nerds out there would probably point to Lord of the Rings. But that was definitely, I think in some ways they learned their lesson and decided from the get-go, they're going to make all three back to back. They kind of kept momentum. They kept the cast together. They kept the creative teams together. So there wasn't that disconnect. Because I wonder if part of the problem with The Godfather Part 3 is that it was a long time between like 2 and 3. Like 1 and 2 are almost, weren't they, did they both win Best Picture like year after year?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's, you've got to be unique in film. So I think I lean towards The Godfather 1. But yeah, that's like a real Sophie's choice for me, man. I don't know which one I like better. But I just kind of like the that era of Michael's rise to power.
There was a version of it. I forgot if it's called the director's version or something like that, where I saw, and it puts everything together in
like chronological.
Yeah, and it shows scenes that were not seen. All right, they're the added footage, and it kind of makes clarification. For example, going back to Godfather 1 in with the movie producer Wolf. I mean, it clearly shows in this special edition that he's a pedophile. Okay, it shows that. There was a scene where where Tom Hagen was at his house, and in the original cut, Hagen asks to get a ride, back to the airport because Don Vito Corleone he likes to hear bad news right away. Well, in this extended version, they show him leaving the dining room, going into this foyer, and upstairs, leaning over the balcony, is a obviously scantily clad underage girl. Okay, she was there for the producer. So yeah, they showed a lot of things like that, and they showed the murderers in Sicily that killed his wife. They showed them in this movie back in the United States and what happened to them. So that's actually a great version if you have it. I don't have that version. I have just the regular 1 and 2. I probably have 3 as well, but like I said, I don't watch that. But
yeah, I like when you get to see extended scenes like that. The extra scenes like that are always cool.
Yeah, it is, and or sometimes you'll get a commentary from surviving cast members or crew that give you little insights into things. But oh no, those are epics. There's no question about it. Parts of it again are a little over the top, but all in all, it was a look into a previous era of this country. Right after World War II is when this Godfather was set pretty much. Godfather Part 2 shows before that, when he's born and all of that. But yeah, it was interesting.
The one criticism I hear from it, because besides the fact that it the stereotypes of all Italian Americans being mafia related, and we know they're not. We know some of them cook pizzas. What else do you guys do? But
we sing really good. We love to sing.
But it also glamorized it. It really, like I said, it was a beautiful looking film, and it was beautiful people in a beautiful environment. When in reality, these are people doing horrible, ugly things, hurting a lot of people. And so that's the one criticism I hear from it. It still doesn't change that I'm not going to watch it every time I get a chance to, just because it's just so. Like I said, even though you're rooting for like criminals, basically, it's kind of criminal against criminal thing. What's your favorite scene from The Godfather? Do you have one?
The first.
Yeah, let's do the first one. Yeah, let's go.
Well, I have a personal. Well, okay. All right. Let me put it this way. I'm not gonna. All right. The beginning, pretty much the wedding scene, only because if you watch the wedding scene, the band, the orchestra, there's an accordionist playing. Okay, his name is Angelo DePippo, who I got to know and who I kind of did long distance. This is what, like right after I had my aneurysm, and he gave me lessons, basically telling me what, this and that. So his scenes, even to this day, when I watch the movie, I always smile because there he is. I knew the guy. I actually got to meet him when he was here in Chicago. He performed. He was the musical director for Robert Merrill, the opera singer, who I got to meet the next day. We all had breakfast, a group of us. But they were performing in Skokie at some place, and I had my physical therapist with me. And Peter Nero was actually, God, what a great piano player he was. I wasn't expecting all of this. So somewhere I got a picture of Angelo and I had my crutches, but Angelo is a great guy. I haven't spoken to him in a long time, but so I have a personal thing with that. So I'd have to go with that scene, but taking Angelo out of the equation, I don't know. I kind of like the scene where Luca Brasi is going to turn on Don Vito Corleone.
Well, we should probably say spoiler alert. We're going to talk about
Spoiler alert. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
So I won't even go into details.
No, go ahead. It's The Godfather's been out there for what, 50 years now?
Yeah. So that scene is fairly realistic. Okay, that is a realistic scene. The scene with Sonny and his demise was over the top. That was a little hard to, no. But the Luca Brasi scene was fairly realistic, believe me. So, and then there was other movies that came out afterwards. The crazy stuff with the De Niro was in, and Joe Pesci, and those are all over the top. But they use some real life. They base a lot of stuff on Tony Spilotro from Chicago and things like that. So they put those scenes in the movie. Pretty brutal, pretty accurate. They changed it around, but those scenes were, shit went down rough. But yeah, no, those are probably the two scenes out of The Godfather that I like the best, that I can think of.
I love the two scenes I love. They're Michael scenes. One is at the restaurant with the police. Yeah, that it was so tense, and you can almost feel that moment because Michael knows what he's going to do, and all this activity is going around. And the way they do the sound is you can hear that. At least the impression I get is that Michael's tuning it all out. He's focused on what he's got to do. And that probably that anxiety and that focus, that tension of what he's about to attempt and the consequences, like you feel it. And it's just subtle. Just they zoom in on him really closely. He's pretending to listen to the people talk. They're eating there. And it just sets the stage so powerfully to me. That to me is really was a pretty awesome scene. And the other one I really felt in my gut was when Michael is going to visit his father at the hospital, and he realizes that no one's there to protect him, and he knows what's going down. And I think was it the caretaker,
Enzo, the big.
Yeah, they get him to stand in front, put his collar up, and put his hand in his pocket. In that moment, again, the power of that tension of we've got to bluff this here because this is life or death. You really feel that. And you also see Michael's leadership. He immediately jumps in and he's like, okay, this is a scenario. I've got to take care of this. This is what I've got available to me, and people's lives are on the line. And it was just, like I said, those two scenes were very powerful to me. There's probably dozens of other ones that I love to see. Like I said, it's one of those movies where scene by scene, they're just all great,
Oh yeah. And, for your father, that's why Enzo was there. But yeah, if you take out the criminal element, the criminal aspect of it, let's say, it is a time machine. There were, at least in the Italian communities, revered men like the Godfather. Okay, some were not always organized crime. They could have been, artisans or musicians or, whatever. But there was a tight knit community. It really was. And so I was not raised in an Italian neighborhood, unfortunately. But when you went to Cleveland with me, you saw the Cleveland's. There was two Little Italys, at least in my time, but that one was always the main one that we saw, Murray Hill, and it's still thriving. Probably more so now, I would think. But yeah, so that part, yeah, you always had those local, like not celebrities even, but just the people that you knew that you could go to if you had a problem. You could talk to these people. The Italians, I don't want to get into this whole thing, but the Italians had it rough. The immigrants had it very rough when they came over here. Okay, I believe that they had the highest infant mortality rate, and they were living in abject poverty. People immigrated in waves, and the Italians were not the first ones over here. So, and there was a lot of prejudice against the Italians. They didn't have the advantage of, let's say, some of the Irish or the English that came over here, that they spoke the language. The Italian immigrants, for the most part, did not. So there was a lot of, let's stick amongst ourselves really tight, and that's what happened. So, and there is also a difference between the Sicilians and the Italians, and of course, a lot of Sicilians came up through Louisiana, New Orleans, in addition to Ellis Island. So you have that thing going on. Yeah, it's an interesting period in America, really. I don't know if you were ever exposed to any of that being in Chicago. I don't think you were not raised in an Italian neighborhood either.
No, and my father, who was the Sicilian, where I get my Italian ancestry from, he passed away when I was young, and that whole side of the family a lot of them had moved away. So besides, my mother had learned to cook marinara for my father, so that was about all I got. Was weekly pasta, but that was about all my Italian heritage really passed down to me, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so I really never got to see that. Never went to Little Italy. We stayed mostly up on the north side, the far north side. Never went down there. So yeah, no, I was never in touch with that community, unfortunately.
Well, I had Italian culture to a degree at the house, along with living in a former Polish neighborhood, going to a Polish school for a while, Polish church. So I was exposed to both of those cultures, but I did not live in the neighborhood, which is different. So like when I moved to Chicago, I hung out in one of the Italian neighborhoods quite a lot, and just hearing their stories of even now, you still have some remnants of it. But yeah, it's just I didn't have that, and it's a clique, like when I first started hanging out, because I came from a different Italian section here in Chicago, there was like pockets of rivalries. They didn't like me at first, they thought I was one of the rats, coming in from from Elmwood Park, and it took them a while to warm up to me,
Mhm.
So, but Cleveland had Little Italy, Murray Hill, and it had Collinwood. So it had those two areas. But even by the time like with me, it was changed, especially Collinwood was changing even when I was a kid. Little Italy or Murray Hill was still trying to hang on. Murray Hill is a very scenic area. I mean, it's smack dab in the middle of Cleveland's greatest culture area and educational area. Okay, as you witnessed, the art museum, Severance Hall, all the hospitals and everything are over there, and they were there even in the 70s when I was growing up. So sort of it mirrors kind of like Little Italy here, Taylor Street, with the hospitals and things like that. Except you don't have the museums and what have you. Cleveland's Little Italy is more authentic than Taylor Street. Taylor Street, to me now, and has been for the last couple, I don't know, at least 15, 20 years, very touristy, more or less,
So you mentioned the Rocky films. So yeah, I think as a kid, I liked Rocky 2 better. I didn't actually, as a kid, I don't think I distinguished between the two of them. My uncle had recorded them from cable or something, and so I would just watch the tapes I think he had 1 and 2 back to back, and I would just watch them, over and over again. And I think, yeah, I love the training montages. It's funny how, like, when you look back on it, there's scenes of Rocky like using a sledgehammer in a junkyard, and yeah, just all the kind of primitive stuff, that the way he was training, it's come back in vogue in a lot of ways. A lot of those kind of mechanisms, to various degrees, have come back. So yeah, I really like that. Actually, it's been a while since I've seen those films. I should go back and watch them, because I've since been to Philadelphia. I wonder how much of that, I've been up the stairs, of course. But yeah, I think those were great. The third film, again, not exactly the same kind of movie. Of course, any movie with Mr. T is going to be a great movie, just by definition. But great in a different way, I guess. But I don't think I even saw any of the subsequent Rocky films.
I pretty much did it till the last couple, but well, the thing about Rocky 3 was his real life transformation. I mean, Rocky, in the movie Rocky, he looked good physically. I mean, Carl Weathers was better built. In Rocky 2, he just lost all of his musculature. He was big, he was bulkier. But in Rocky 3, he looked like a Mr. America. I mean, he was lean and just so, cut. I couldn't believe it. As a matter of fact, I didn't get to see a lot of movies, but I remember my buddy and I went to some theater to see whatever movie it was. This is before Rocky 3 came out. So anyway, as the crowd is coming out of the movie before we could go in, there was this lady, and I remember hear her saying, "My God, he looks like Mr. America." I'm like, what is she talking about? So when we got into the movie, whatever movie it was we were going to see, they showed a preview of Rocky 3. Well, immediately I knew exactly who she was referring to, because Stallone was unbelievably in shape. I mean, he got, I guess, even better in Rocky 4, but I mean, goodness. So that was the biggest takeaway for me. But yeah, Rocky was very inspirational to me, because I was into boxing then and everything. Rocky 2 was a bigger movie for me because he won. Right, I was a big Rocky fan, and he won. And after that, yeah, it's all been pretty much downhill. The one with what would it be, Rocky 5, I guess they would call it, unless they had a name for it, with Tommy Morrison. There was a couple scenes in there that kind of hit home to me, but yeah, he peaked early with probably Rocky. Rocky 2, okay, but and then a couple of my students took me to see Rocky Balboa. That's the last one I saw, actually, and that was years ago. And we went to some theater where they serve you food, where you could get food, which I thought was cool.
How was it watching the boxing scenes?
Not realistic at all. I mean, he would never, he'd be dead in real life. No, they weren't. That's the thing. Stallone's boxing was terrible. Now, I'll tell you, Carl Weathers looked great. I mean, he really did. I mean, even Mr. T to a degree, because he did a little amateur boxing and he did that tough man stuff beforehand. So I had already seen Mr. T go at it. But, Carl Weathers really looked good. He did. He moved nice, and he was a parody of, Muhammad Ali. But yeah, the thing with the Rocky character, yeah, he was, not really skilled. He's just a tough guy. And there is a difference between being skilled and being tough. I mean, okay, we're talking fictional here, but Rocky Balboa was tougher than Apollo Creed, but Apollo Creed was more skilled. And in that movie, in those first two at least, it showed that Stallone's indomitable spirit, his toughness, won out. And for that was symbolic, probably for not just me, but for a lot of, not just kids either, just for people who probably didn't have the breaks in life, who came from the quote unquote wrong side of the tracks, everything that I could align myself with. And so that really gave me great motivation. It was hard for me to, I could not, what's the word I'm looking for? I could not jump on the Apollo Creed thing. I love his physicality, how great a shape he was in, and his boxing skills, but I could not relate to that extraordinary wealth that he had. That was like another world to me, another planet. Whereas you saw Rocky, how he lived, that's how I lived. I lived in that shitty neighborhood like that, so I could relate.
Yeah, I remember going back when I first started to learn to box as a kid at Degerberg. So I'd watched Rocky before. And like I said, whenever they'd have the training montages or whatever, I'd get all hyped up and I'd have to go work out. I'd go for a run, or I'd, work out with whatever I had. But after getting some basic boxing training and going back, all of a sudden it's kind of like the scales fell from my eyes, and I was watching and it's like, oh my God, what are they doing in there?
Yeah.
It was shocking to me. And it's funny how with even a slight education, watching something, the difference, you're right. The movie's not about boxing technique at all. It's other, that's not the focus of it, but it is hard to watch once that part of it, I suppose, at least once you start to do some boxing and things. It almost feels disrespectful that they're showing it in that light, but obviously they're doing it for more dramatic effect, so, but as far as Stallone movies, the other one I love First Blood. That's another movie that had a big impact on me, especially the first half of that, where he's being hassled by cops and then he kind of lashes back out. I love the guerrilla warfare that he does out in the forest. That to me is on par with his Rocky movies. I love that. I think it may be my favorite action movie of all time. It's been imitated a lot, and the sequels were terrible. I mean, if you enjoy them for their horrible campiness, you can enjoy the sequels, but they really missed out. And the other thing I like about the movie too is it was right after a lot of movies like The Deer Hunter, Apocalypse Now, and that talked about the horrors of the war and all the human cost of it, but it really didn't celebrate the veterans as much. Where this one, it really showed them as being people we should admire. And I think like during the 70s, and I think this movie came out in the early 80s. So I think that tide was turning, but I think that had a big impact of shifting, and reminding everybody how heroic a lot of these heroes, these veterans were, and what they went through and what they're capable of. So granted, I mean, obviously this is an exaggeration where, it's taken, but I just love that movie to death. What are some of your other favorite action movies?
Action movies. Well, I mean, First Blood, Rambo, because we had that hit kind of close. I mean, we knew somebody that killed themselves that was a Vietnam veteran, ended up committing suicide. When that movie came out, there was some guy in Cleveland that copycatted Rambo and took off into the metro parks, and did his thing. It made the news locally. They actually had to capture him. I don't think they killed him, but boy, see now action movies, I'm a stickler for like authenticity. So a lot of action movies, it just, wow, that's just so over the top, not real. Like today's movies, I cannot watch and I'm not alone in this, the CGI and all this crazy stuff that they do that is just not possible. I've even seen interviews with older stuntmen, not super old, but my age, a little bit older, who are like, man, this is, they put us out of business, and this is not realistic.
Mhm.
But I do like Die Hard, the first Die Hard. I'll watch that when it's on. I would consider that an action movie.
Oh, sure.
Uh,
Some would say it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah, they do claim it's a Christmas movie. Several, yeah, that's a good one. Well, there's another movie that I'm just going to throw out there. That's not an action movie, but it's an Italian movie called 29th Street. If anybody's ever heard of it, watch it. It's a good one. Um, that's a really good movie. Pope of Greenwich Village is another Italian movie that shows some mob shit, but doesn't make Italians look bad. I just wanted to throw those out there. But yeah, I would have to go with Die Hard unless you can come up with some more that I'm not thinking of right now.
Well, I'll throw some out there at you. How did you like Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Well, I never saw it.
You not seen it yet?
No.
Wow, that's you know, what's the matter with you, man? That's a classic of all time. I actually have a great story with it too, because obviously it's become a franchise, and a lot of the sequels have not lived up. But that first movie, boy, I got to see it in the theater. I was with my I was very fortunate, actually. I got to see a lot of movies in the theater. I got to see the original Star Wars when I was 6 years old in the theater. And that was like a mind-blowing experience, because I didn't know movies could be that like awe-inspiring. I mean, nowadays, like you talk about CGI, I don't think kids today, at least visually, can have their minds blown by a movie. I mean, maybe some of the Marvel movies have done that, but it's much harder now because everything's possible. There's nothing that they can put on screen, that if someone can dream it up, they can draw it in a computer now. So in some of the ways, that ability of being awed by that, I don't know if that exists anymore. But yeah, like I had a buddy that I met later on. He was a work buddy, but he was about the same age, and he saw Star Wars as a kid in the theater as well. And he basically described it as like Moses seeing God. Like he came out of there like, Charlton Heston being stunned with the 10 Commandments, he couldn't believe what he saw. And that was my experience too. It was like life altering. And so this is a long tangent about movies, but my point being that I kind of grew up in an era where I got to see some like what I'd call very classic movies, in the theater, and just being hit full force by them. And Raiders of the Lost Ark was the other one. And I was very fortunate. One of my best friends growing up in grammar school, his father was British, and he had fought in World War II. He had fought. He was a teenager and survived actually the Battle of Britain. He grew up in Coventry, which, if you ever see, a lot of times in books when they show the decimation of the Battle of Britain, it's a picture of Coventry because that town was just leveled. His mom was killed, for instance. So my friend's grandmother was killed during the bombing raids. I'm going to go on a tangent again, but it's a story. But he said, occasionally the Germans would fly a single plane overhead, and they would just skywrite a big question mark in the sky over the town to say maybe tonight they're coming to bomb or not. They're just part of their psychological warfare that they would do. I went camping with him, my friend and his father, a couple of times, and it stormed, thunderstorms. He couldn't sleep. He was up all night, because the thunders. Yeah, he had the PTSD of the bombs dropped. But the long story short is when he was old enough to serve, he served in the North African theater of the war, which is pretty much where a lot of this Raiders of the Lost Ark was filmed. So I got to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark with a guy who is at least, tangentially familiar with that environment. And he was just of a different generation, clearly. There's a very famous scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it's probably one of my favorite memories of being there with him, where, it's a chase scene through this town, and Indiana Jones is confronted by this sword-wielding guy, and he's flashing his sword around, and it's all crazy and doing figure eights, like he's gonna, and he just pulls out his gun and shoots him.
I've seen that scene. They've shown that on TV.
Yeah, it's iconic. It's a great scene, but I remember my friend's father belly laughing out loud when that happened, because none of us knew it was coming. Now it's kind of cliche, everybody's seen it, but it was kind of cool to see this older, man who's kind of, from a different generation. Just that joke hit home for him too. Like, it was just like one of those universally hilarious moments. So I just have a very warm feeling about that movie. And that's another one with the stunts too. Like, there's a scene where there's a fight on a a troop transport truck, and there's a stuntman who's crawling, off the hood of the truck, under the truck and around back, and there's a guy doing it. That's amazing to me, the in-camera stunt work. So yeah, I don't know, like nowadays, if you saw it, if it would have the same impact. Some movies, it's still a very fun, good movie, but I don't know if the freshness of it too, some of it's lost. In a lot of ways, that movie was like a throwback to the serials of like the 40s, just an adventure film, with evil Nazis, which, I think there was a long time where that wasn't a theme again in movies. So, like, what about comedies? Do you have any comedies you like?
Oh, well, the Smokey and the Bandit was hysterical. There was a movie called The Party with Peter Sellers. Of course, Airplane was just unbelievably funny with those gags. Now, it's a dated movie, because some of those gags were for the time.
They weren't exactly racially sensitive, but
well, that's Blazing Saddles there with
that too.
With that
True.
kind of stuff. But yeah, no, there was, but a lot of funny comedies. Well, you were in my neighborhood. You were all the way around my neighborhood. You were everywhere, right? And much hasn't really changed. There were no movie theaters ever anywhere near there. So, in order for me to go see a movie, you had to drive. I mean, for a brief time, there was a movie theater downtown called the Hippodrome that I could get to by bus, but upstairs of the or I think it was either upstairs or downstairs, I forget now, was Danny Vase Pool Hall. But yeah, so that's another reason why I didn't get to see movies like you may have or others, because we didn't have any around. We didn't have the money to go see these movies. So the only other option would be to go to the mall, go to a mall or something. And many times it was just impractical to do. But yeah, I remember laughing out loud at, that kind of, like I say, Smokey and the Bandit 1 and 2 was really, really funny. I can't even think right now but if you named them, I would probably say, oh yeah, I remember that. But Airplane was generally considered, like, for the longest time, that was considered the funniest movie ever made. I mean, it just was hysterical.
Yeah, I remember that being kind of like one of those movies when it was out. It just like everybody was talking about it. Yeah. Like, everybody was doing the bits. Everybody was like, it's one of those like cultural moments where I don't think anything had been done like that, where the joke density, it was really it was a masterpiece, honestly.
Yeah, then you have like Animal House and Caddyshack later on, the Jerk with Steve Martin. Those were all the bigger ones that I can think of in my day. I'm probably forgetting some, late 70s, early 80s. But we came out, like my time came out with the stupid funny movies, like Up the Academy, Porky's, Revenge of the Nerds. Those were the kind of cinematic classic masterpieces of comedy in my day and age. So I wasn't, I did wrong place, wrong time.
Porky's played a role in my upbringing, but it wasn't comedy. It was more of a.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we got to keep this clean.
Yeah. But I love
American Pie. I like that one.
Yeah, that's a fairly recent one. Well, God, talk about time flying. I bet you that's probably
20 years.
20 years. Yeah. Crazy. What about Young Frankenstein? Did you like that movie?
Oh, Marty Feldman. Yeah, that was, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I love that movie. That's a classic, just a masterpiece, And it's cool that like a spoof of another movie. I love the original Frankenstein. I mean, I like a lot of older, black and white, atmospheric movies, noir movies, horror movies. Did you ever get into Monty Python? Did you like the Holy Grail?
No, I never got into them. I never saw them. But there was an Irish comedian that we got to see as a kid called Dave Allen. He had a TV show. This is not movies now, but Dave Allen at Large, and of course Benny Hill. I don't think I've ever laughed as hard as I did at Dave Allen at Large, and of course Benny Hill was awesome. Not movies, but that was the extent of the British thing for me that I can think of. But no, I never saw, never got into the Monty Python. Not because I didn't like it. I've never seen them.
Mhm.
So you know,
I think I think they did like the Benny Hill, Monty, or Dave Allen back-to-back thing here too. Was Dave Allen, did he always sit in a chair and
yeah,
kind
and
of
he had his
smoke?
finger off, and he would drink his booze. Yeah, he was funny.
Yeah, but I think at the end he'd always say, "May your God," or something about "May
Yeah.
your God go with you" or something. But he would do like a variety sketch show. It was back to back. I need to go back and watch some of those Benny Hills. Those it was like the Three Stooges with Smut. You know, they can't make those anymore.
I think he used to say, "Thank you, good night, and may your God go with you," or something.
Yeah, I just had a vague. It was like this oddly dry, kind of classy way of saying goodbye. After
Well,
this
he was
wacky
very
comedy.
anti-Catholic. That was what, you know, he was but he was technically, I don't know what his religious beliefs were. I don't care. I didn't psychoanalyze. It was just some of that stuff was just hysterical to me. Really, really funny. Yeah, I remember when I found out that he died, I was kind of sad, you know, about that.
Mhm.
And Benny Hill was more slapstick, just, you know, with all the pretty girls, and that was a whole nother thing, you know, which was great. But Benny Hill was in a couple of movies. I know that he was in, I think, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, they said.
That was a cool movie too, by the way. Willy Wonka is like as a kid movie. It's got some disturbing shit in it too. But
Again, I never saw it. So, I mean, that's
oh
Gene
really?
Wilder.
Yeah, I'm a big Gene Wilder fan. I like him. He's a good guy. Was a good guy. But yeah, that was a fun movie growing up as a kid. Uh, and also like see now a lot of it. So a lot of my films I just caught on television growing up. So like
Yeah.
and that was the one thing that like so like when the Wizard of Oz would come on once a year or whatever, that was always like a big event, you know, like we'd make sure to make, you know, because you couldn't see it again. If it was gone, there was no VHS or DVD or streaming. So you had one shot, you know, this was it to see it. So that became like an annual event for us. I love that movie as a kid growing up. Um, what else? Yeah, I don't know. Tons of favorite movies.
Well, I always thought What About Bob was a funny movie. Okay, that's not when I wasn't a kid when that came out, but you know, that I used to like to watch that when it was on. You know, now of course, you know, I probably have it, you know, but yeah, and again, movies to me are always like food, you know, like what do I have a taste for today? You know, what do I want to watch? Um, and it's I think I've lost a lot of my zest in life, you know, my naivety is gone, that's for sure. So it's hard for me to really find movies that I could sit there and say that I would like enjoy or want to watch. So I tend to end up watching the same movies that I know I like over and over because I don't have to think. You know, I could just sit back and kind of immerse myself, and it transcends me. It takes me away from where we're at now, 2021. Then it'll put me in another time, you know, another frame of life. And you know, that's what I like about, again, a lot of the older movies. They'll take me back to a fake innocent time. Okay, we know, well, maybe we don't know, but we should know that, you know, the 50s, 60s, 70s were not really a great time in life for a lot of people, right? But we wax nostalgia and we think, oh yeah, it was such a better time. Well, I'm not so certain about all of that, but I can tell you this much: it's a fantasy in a way. You can pretend that you're escaping to a different or a better time when in reality it may not have been. So I tend to gravitate towards that more than anything right now.
Well, for sure, escapism is a big part of it. It allows you to check out at least for a little bit and enjoy something. Um, oh, you know, comedies. What about the Marx Brothers? Did you ever get into those guys?
Only when they were on television, which wasn't often. Yeah, they would show black and whites now and then of the Marx Brothers. We used to get shows like, again, this TV. Um, uh, Leon Errol, I don't know if you were familiar with him. The Dead End Kids, Bowery Boys,
Oh, Bowery Boys, I remember.
Abbott and Costello, and then I saw their movies, Three Stooges movies and TV episodes, The Little Rascals. But yeah, no, I thought the Marx Brothers. I just thought Groucho was just very funny guy.
Oh, he's hilarious. Yeah, I think Duck Soup is maybe like it's like the Citizen Kane of comedy movies. It was way ahead of its time, honestly. You didn't see anything as surreal and weird as that movie until probably Monty Python in the 70s. I mean, because there's just a weird period where, like you mentioned, Abbott and Costello, and I mean, they were funny guys, but they just didn't do weird, you know, wacky stuff like you'd see, really inventive stuff. So yeah, if someone hasn't seen Duck Soup, go out and see it. It's surprisingly good. Consider it was made like in the 30s. But yeah, Groucho, the whole group was hilarious. Um, Real national treasure, those guys were. Um,
Well, Lou Costello, a little fight tie-in. Lou Costello, I think his real name was Costello. He was Italian. Um, he had a bodyguard, and his bodyguard's name was Pat Comiskey, who was a heavyweight boxing contender. And Comiskey actually did some acting. He was in several movies, normally the heavy bit parts here or there. He was in The Harder They Fall, which was a great fight movie. Humphrey Bogart, loosely based on Primo Carnera. Max Baer was in the movie, and Pat Comiskey's in that movie. They show him fighting and so on, and he's in essence playing the role of Ernie Schaff. But anyway, yeah, he was big, hulking, flat nose, you name it. But yeah, he was Lou Costello's bodyguard. So figured that'd be like a little tie-in to our normal talks about fighting.
well, speaking about fighting, what was that Bronson movie that you liked? That one,
Hard
Bare
Times.
Knuckle.
Hard time.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think of other lesser known fight movies that maybe people should check out. Those like, any other ones come to mind?
Well, that I can't think of the name of it, but that Robert Ryan movie that I told you about, where he's actually fighting real time. He was a boxer and champion, I think, in the either college or something like that, military. And I'm sorry, I just don't recall the name right now because I get caught off guard. Well, I see. The thing is, there were actors probably even back then that or boxers or fighters that became actors. I kind of like it sometimes when you get an actor like Carl Weathers, right, who wasn't a boxer, wasn't a fighter, but he whipped himself into shape. He worked out. He looked passable, right? You probably wouldn't know. But yeah, I can't think off the top of my head of any other fight movie. I'm sure they're out there. I guess you could kind of talk about. I don't know if you want to get into Clint Eastwood movies where he was fighting all the time. Any which way you can. And all with the chipmunk or with the chimpanzee, orangutan, whatever it was. I don't really remember because I really didn't watch those movies. I wasn't a big. I wasn't a Clint Eastwood fan. I did like Charles Bronson. Ironically, in that Hard Times, I remember reading that the director or the producer, probably the director, said, they could only film about 30 to 45-second scenes because even though Bronson looked ripped and looked in shape, he was such a heavy smoker. He had no endurance. Okay, so you couldn't do an extended fight scene with him. They had to kind of film those scenes, like I said, 30 to 45 seconds because he was gassed. But he sure was rock hard. He was a coal miner for a while from Pennsylvania, not far from where my dad was from.
If you see Bronson, some of the earlier films, he was big too. Like by the 70s, I think he started to lose weight.
Okay.
But I saw some films of him in the 50s. He was a big dude. I mean, at least he looked solid.
I think he boxed a little, not maybe competitively, but he did boxing training. Which probably, that was the big thing. Boxing, maybe some wrestling back then. There were, martial arts really didn't take over until the later 50s and 60s, really. Then, of course, you had the guys that trained a lot with Bruce Lee, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Coburn, Steve McQueen. I'm sure there was others that, I don't follow that. You should know more. You were in the JKD more, But yeah, there was a Blood in the Sun, which was talk about fight movies. James Cagney did this. It was right around the World War II era time, maybe early 50s, late 40s. And there was a lot of judo in that movie. Now, James Cagney allegedly had a black belt in judo. I don't know. He did do some of his own judo moves in that movie. It's been a lot of years since I saw it. But I also remember there was obviously stunt doubles as well. But yeah, that's an old, you know, that some people claim may have been the first martial art movie because it's heavily, there was a lot of judo apparently in the movie. Again, I don't remember.
Yeah, I know exactly the movie you're talking about, and I think you can actually find on YouTube that the big finale fight scene where he has a big judo match. You know, it's kind of a mix of boxing and judo. You know, with the big, I guess, Japanese like villain. But yeah, I agree that a lot of people consider that one of the first martial arts films, for sure, Western ones that has a focus on martial
Oh yeah,
arts.
well, that's what I meant. West, I'm sure that maybe even in the 30s, there may have been some, you know, thrown in. I know that there was some pro wrestling type of movies. You know, there was wrestlers that acted and did things, you know, for sure. But yeah, to me, it's like there was like Naked City, right? I think that's what it was called. That there was Stanislaus Zabisco was in the movie, okay, and he wrestled. Um, and he wrestled against Mike Mazurki. They ended up remaking it later in the 70s or 80s and got rid of the wrestling. I think it was more boxing oriented. But I forgot the name of it. The Naked in the City, Naked in the City, or something like that. I used to know all this from the top of my head, but I don't remember things. But when you see that, I mean, the first thing that I thought of when I saw it was, wow, Zabisco's a small guy. You know, I mean, he was big but short, really short. Which yeah, I always just assumed, you know, that he was a 6 footer or something like that, but he wasn't. But he was still thick, you know. You could tell at one point, but he moved, you know, real slow. He was an older guy. I don't know how old he was, probably in his 60s, you know, but yeah, he just moved slowly. But it was a pretty cool scene. It was a pretty good fight scene, to be honest. Kind of like an MMA scene, you know, boxing, or I mean, wrestling, but with the punches and stuff thrown in, and you know, some submission attempts and so on. Nothing extravagant. But yeah, that was another movie that had a couple, you know, had a nice scene in it. And I'm sure there was others.
Do you ever remember the Thin Man movies?
Yeah.
Those were more like a romantic comedy, like who done it movies. But the reason I bring it up is in the second Thin Man movie, there's a scene where the protagonist, the main couple, comes home. They're like, the husband's a retired detective and the wife's just rich, and they just they solve crimes going from parties. It's just kind of a fun, like, escapist movies for back in the day. And it was written by, like, I think the first one was written by Dashiell Hammett, maybe. He was a big noir guy. But long story short, they returned to their home where, you know, they were out traveling, and they come home and there's a giant party going on at their house that they were not aware of. But as they're going through the house, there's a group of guys, like a pro wrestling group, and they're talking and shoving each other around. And one of the guys puts a double wrist lock on the other guy, and you can see it. I don't think there was a twist on the wrist lock, but it was one of those things I was watching with. I was like, Ben, check this out.
Yeah, well, now I just come to me. I think it was called Night in the City. That's the movie that I'm talking about with Richard Widmark was the star of the movie, and it was filmed or based in England. But yeah, well, I don't want to we're not going to talk about wrestling so much today, but just remember, most of those guys back then did not know the real deal hooking or anything like that. They knew the show holds, and while yes, they would work on the uninitiated, just like I try to tell people today, most of your street fights where people are getting knocked out, they're not getting knocked out by professional fighters. Okay, they're getting knocked out with wild punches, or you know, punches that are not technically proper, but they will still work if they land. And that's the comparison with these submission holds and shit that a lot of guys are passing off. They'll work. They're not elite. You know, against a guy who's physical, you know, they're going to get out of these holds. But yeah, I used to, as a kid, watch some things where I think there was an Abbott and Costello, it may have been, or a Three Stooges movie where there was some sort of wrestling going on, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I already knew how to wrestle by then. I'm like, oh my God, no, you know, no, not good. or it might even have been the Hercules movie or so. The Hercules Unchained, like the second Hercules movie with Primo Carnera. It might have been that one where there was some fight thing going on, and it just was like, oh,
Well, the
kind of
Stooges were really good for effective ripping.
huh? What?
The Stooges had more authentic
Yeah,
ripping.
right, Mo. Yeah, Mo especially, he was good. Yeah, which is kind of funny when you have to look back at that and say that's probably more realistic than a lot of the movies, you know. Yeah, but just like you say with that figure eight in the Raiders of the Lost Ark and the guy pulling out the gun, that's about as real as it gets. I mean, because that's how it was on the streets, man. They're not going to part around with all this crazy shit. They're just going to blast you away. You know, even today, you know, with the drive-by shootings and stuff like that, you can have all these skills, but boy, if the guy's, you know, he's got the drop on you, man, it's all over. But no, that's the beautiful thing about movies. You know, movies are like a good book. You know, you can immerse yourself in it. That's why I used to say about the James Bond movies, the older ones. You know, the Sean Connery and Roger Moore. The movies themselves were, you know, even as a kid, they were kind of ridiculous in a way. But it was the beauty of the locations that they shot at for me. You know, getting to see different parts of the world. You know, Italy or Greece or Europe or what have you. Different parts of America that got me out of the ghetto kind of thing. Because most of the television shows were either idyllic, the Brady Bunch, you know, Southern California where it never rains, or they were the grimy grit that I was used to, you know, Chicago or New York cop shows and things like that, or just crime shows that just showed kind of like just nothing that I could really relate to. But yeah, but the James Bond flicks, I used to always want to watch them because yeah, you're going to see a beautiful, beautiful women, and you're going to see beautiful locations. You're going to see wealth in a way, you know, because Bond always dressed nice and, you know, drove a nice car and this. So that was kind of nice for me. I'm not saying for anybody else, but that was like my escape. And even to this day, I still watch the old ones. I have every Bond movie except for the latest one. Because of just that reason. It just, you know, they're painful to watch if you're trying to really like get into the movie. But yeah, the scenery and stuff is just, the locations are just fantastic. And it, you know, I like it for that reason alone.
Yeah, there's something about the nostalgia of the older ones and like the vintage look and feel, like kind of it's just fun to watch 60s movies, just the look and feel of them, as even if the plot is completely ridiculous, you know, even if, you know, Roger Moore is going to take off with a, well, not Roger Moore, but like Sean Connery, I think in Thunderball, he does like a jetpack scene where he jumps. It's like, it's ridiculous, but it's still, it's kind of fun because it's like I said, it's vintage futurism, you know, and
Well, let me, on that note with the Roger Moore, this pertains more to him than it does Sean Connery, because now that I'm old and I'm older than Roger Moore in those movies, just him, I mean, he looks old. The first movie, okay, he kind of looked all right. Then he ended up ultimately getting plastic surgery and everything. But there was one movie, and I don't remember what it was, that he was in, that the lead actress absolutely steadfastly refused to have any love scenes with him. And she went public about this. She said, "This is ridiculous. He's my dad's age. There's just no way I would find this man attractive." And I see that now. I see Roger Moore. I mean, and he looks like older than what he really was. And he's still getting all these younger girls, 20, 25 years old, 25 years younger. And yes, I know that sometimes that happens in the real world, but it's ridiculous. And I actually cringe, you know, when I see that, because it borders on the dirty old man, creepy old man thing. And you know, I'm all about, you know, trying to stay fit and dressing nice when I go out and looking as good as I can, but for my age. And I know my limitations. You know, I'm not going to sit there and say younger women haven't approached me. They have, but generally, I try to stay in a very narrow mind, age group. Now I don't go out now at all because of my mom's situation, but when I did, I like to kind of keep it, focused on somebody closer to my age. So when Sean Connery was starring in it, he was relatively still young. He may have been in his 30s. So for him to game on a 28-year-old or 20, that's fine. Okay, here's probably a 10-year window there, which okay. But Roger Moore was just, man, it was getting to the point of, it's cringeworthy.
Yeah, I don't go back and the first Bond movie I ever saw as a kid was a Roger Moore movie. But then I went back and watched the Sean Connery ones, and those are the ones I like. I like Sean Connery. I also like the new guy, Daniel Craig. He's kind of I enjoy those movies too. The first one, Casino Royale, was very good. I think it was almost kind of the Bond franchise rebooting itself because of the Jason Bourne movies. There's kind of been like a modern view or like aesthetic for spy movies, and you can't really go back. You can't go back to the Roger Moore kind of comic book ridiculousness, because it's just been made too much fun of with like Austin Powers and things. You can't go back to that. So yeah, I know I don't think you've seen any of the Daniel Craig movies, but it'd be interesting to see your take on it, because they have
I did
like
see
kind of
the one you just mentioned.
the Casino Royale.
What I liked about the Roger Moore, the cinematography was better than the Sean Connery ones. I remember in the Casino Royale one, that's one where he was having that heart attack or whatever it was, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I had a hard time. I'm not a Daniel Craig guy. I mean, I just, I have a hard time, for me, looking at him as a, spy, just as I do with Roger Moore. I actually thought that George Lazenby would have been really good. He showed some emotion. There was a scene in his movie where, on his Majesty's Secret Service, where he was like shaking. He was like scared. He showed a human element. Now, granted, that was his first acting role, and I guess there was things going on. I'm not going to get into it because I don't know. I'm just what I heard. That's a shame that they didn't develop that didn't work out with him, because I thought that he had the physicality. To me, he looked the part. He was the most athletic out of all of them. He could actually look like he could fight. He was, a good sized guy. And it's just a shame that, that petered out.
Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of my favorites. That's
Yeah.
one of the great Bond. That's the first one where they do like any of the skiing stuff, and Diana Riggs in there too, which is a bonus.
Yeah, well, I guess she didn't get along with him, but I couldn't get Pierce Brosnan. I get why they would want him. I get it. Now I just kept looking at him as the dingbat, like from Remington Steele. And then Timothy Dalton, I don't know what to think of him. I don't know, his looks just kind of, I don't know. There was something. I think that he was probably the best actor. I think he has the most credentials. He was a Shakespearean actor and so on. So from a talent standpoint, I think he had it. I don't know what happened there. I thought I used to know at one point there was some hang up with filming rights or something, and then by the time that all got ironed out, which was a few year process, he just moved on to other things. But yeah, I don't watch the James Bond movies, and I never did for any like intellectual stimulation. It was, I told you, it was, for me, it was always about the beauty of it, the escape of it, and for me, that's what I liked about it. I never saw this Byrne movie thing. I never saw The Matrix. I'm telling you, I live in a shell. I never seen any of these movies. Okay, this John Wick guy, I don't know. I don't even know what that is. I never saw any of those movies. I don't know. I don't have any idea. Yeah, so I'm kind of out of the loop with all of that. I'm an old school guy in certain ways, but I got to get with it, I guess. But it just isn't happening.
Well, maybe I'll close things up kind of with your observation about like part of the issue is when you've spent a lifetime of watching movies and you've seen a lot of good ones, like the ones we mentioned, like The Godfather, other classics like that. It starts to get hard to impress you. once you've seen dozens of some of the best movies, your run-of-the-mill movies, the ones that they just churn out, it becomes very hard and to be impressed. And that's one of the downsides is I think you become a lot more critical of a viewer, quality wise.
Yeah, and I think too, part of it is you get to know the actors' personal lives. Like you'll see these guys, all of a sudden they're all ripped and cut because they're on drugs. They do the growth hormone, the all of that. They have that little code word. We talked about it once before about what it is that they eat. I forgot those three. They all say the same thing, but they're cheating to get fit. They're not. This is not really them. So I think we know a little bit too much about their personal lives. Whereas when you watch an old movie, you'll see character actors in them that I don't even know their names. I know nothing about them. And I just, in my opinion, think the level of acting is just so much better generally than what we have today. I'm not saying every actor we have stinks, but I just see when I watch some of these older movies or even old TV shows from the 70s, you have older actors on there that are doing like a limited script, yet you could see their emotions. You could, they're selling this part. They're believable. Whereas I think sometimes today it's more about the special effects or it's about tricks, camera tricks, zoom in, zoom out, crazy angles, this and that. And just the focus is off the acting and it's more focused on the whole environment. And I don't know, it just, for me now, this is only me. I don't like it. I cannot relate to it. I just can't. So that's, I think, what makes it bad for me. It's a shame that I feel this way, but I can tell you many years ago when I was still a jobbing musician, I had more than one girl say they didn't want to go out to hear a band with me. They wouldn't do it anymore because I was too critical. Oh, that drummer sucks, or the keyboard player, he played the wrong changes. I ruined the experience for them, right? Because I knew how it really should be done, and I couldn't separate. I guess I'm an idealist, right? This is the way it should be. This is the elite level, and we're not getting that here. And I think that's how I look at some of the movies, not all, but many of the actors and just the things in general. It's just too fake. It's just too over the top. And I don't know if you can act. It's all the craziest effects. Yeah, I'm not into it. But that's just me now. That's me being me. And I'm not saying my way's the right way. I'm a castaway. I'm on the outside looking in. I wish I could enjoy these movies. I can't.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to your earlier point about it depends what you're in the mood for. If hey, I just, today I'm not looking for, steak and potatoes. Today I'm just, today I just want to get a sundae. Just want to get something light, or just something fun. So it depends what mood you're going in for. And I do think that, to kind of mess with this, carry this analogy further, is that I do think the market shifted at some point where they realized people just want to eat junk food, that the majority of the market is for buying junk food. I remember hearing or reading somewhere that maybe ground zero for that was like Top Gun, where it was all glitz and beautiful people. Because prior to that, a lot of movies in the 70s were actors who didn't necessarily look beautiful. They were good actors. They talked about the new holiday, Hollywood. You had, all kinds of heavy movies. But I think, it is a business. And I do think, to your point, is that I think the majority of the market is out there just for, all flash and no substance. And so if that's what you want at the moment, cool. They've got options for you. But even that sometimes can be superficial. Sometimes they can just throw special effects at it and it still doesn't necessarily make a fun movie. So,
and and some of it is a big investment. Like, okay, they'll make a sequel or a remake, I should say, which who wants to see that? But some of these are franchises. This Fast and Furious or something. I never seen it, not one of them. But why would I? Because now I got to watch 9 more of them, or how many? Just like the Raiders of the Lost Ark. How many are there? Star Wars. I never saw Star Wars, but how many Star Wars sequels are there? 10, 8, 5? I don't know. This is a lot, because now you got to watch all of that shit. No. Just give me a movie like the best years of our lives. It's just one and done. Or even like The Godfather. I don't need to watch part 3. 1 and 2 is fine. I can sit through that. So for me, it's sometimes it would be just like, too big of an investment. Like when I go on the internet to check my email or something, I see the news things pop up, and it's this friggin' what's the guy's name? The bald-headed guy that thinks he's Vin Diesel. He's crying about trying to make up with Dwayne Johnson and shit because they had a falling out over some movie. Oh, please, man, let's make this movie. Come on. You're supposed to play some tough guy on TV and yet around the movies, and yet in real life you're crying, you're whining. All right, come on, get over it. It just loses all of it to me. I don't watch these movies. I have no desire to watch them. Just let me watch Mannix and Cannon and all the old streets of San Francisco. I'll be happy. The original Hawaii 5-0. I'm okay. Goodbye. That's it. I live in my own world. Leave me be. So that's why I'm single, I guess. But anyway, I guess we should wrap it up. We've been going at about an hour and a half. That's cool. I want to thank you again, Joe. I thought it was kind of lighthearted today. That's good. I sure did miss out on a lot of my movies that I do like, but we hit the main ones. I hope you have a pleasant week. Thanksgiving is coming up soon. Where holidays are among us. Holiday season. So, thanks again.
No, it was fun talking and hearing the films that you like and influenced you. So, yeah, this is Joe and Tony signing off. We'll see you guys at the movies.
At the movies. See you guys.